Most people see the 1917 George V. 1 penny, the 1938 George VI 1 penny, and the 1963 Queen Elizabeth Roman II 1 penny and think they are just old coins. But the 2025 market is shocking collectors because rare strikes, high-grade examples, and hidden details are turning these pennies into serious money. The craziest part is that millions of them are sitting in drawers, jars, and old collections without anyone realizing their real value. Collectors are now hunting every detail: the rim, the color, the strike, and the condition, because even a small difference can push a penny from ordinary change to high value. If you have any of these coins in very fine condition or better, you could be holding a surprising profit that could shock you in today's USA dollar market. Check your pennies now, because the hidden value is real and bigger than most people ever imagined. 1917 George V. 1 penny, United Kingdom. Imagine you hold a dark brown heavy copper penny in your hand and the date on it reads 1917, and for a moment you feel the weight of a world that existed more than 100 years ago. This coin did not come from quiet times. It was struck in the middle of the Great War, a period filled with tension, fear, hope, and unstoppable change. Every mark on this coin feels like a whisper from someone who lived through a time that shaped history. When you look closely at the surface, you see the face of King George V, a monarch who ruled during one of the hardest eras the United Kingdom ever faced. His portrait stands tall and proud, with strong lines and a calm expression that hides the storm taking place across the world. The penny itself is large, solid, and full of character. It was made from a bronze mixture of copper, tin, and zinc, which gives it that warm brown tone that slowly darkens with age. It feels solid in the palm, and when you tilt it under light, the edges glow softly with a deep reddish tone that only true old bronze can show. This coin is more than money. It is a survivor of an era filled with struggle and change. The reverse design shows Britannia seated strong and proud, holding a trident in one hand and a shield in the other. She looks out across the sea, a symbol of strength and calm power. Behind her, the waves rise and fall, and the horizon stretches out like the future of a nation that refused to fall. This design carried meaning for millions of people who used this penny every day in shops, trains, factories, and homes. Britannia reminded them of stability in a time when the world was full of uncertainty. During 1917, the Royal Mint struck millions of these pennies because they were the backbone of daily trade. Paper notes were unstable and coins were trusted. People carried these pennies everywhere. They bought food with them. They paid for trains with them. They handed them to children. They saved them in jars. They lost them on the streets. They carried them into the war front in pockets of soldiers who fought in muddy trenches. Some of these pennies traveled across oceans to distant places under British influence or trade routes. This is why you can find a 1917 George V penny today in countries far away from the United Kingdom. The minting process at that time required great force and precision. Each coin was struck with thick, heavy dies that left deep impressions in the metal. That is why the details on many of these pennies still survive today, even after 100 years. The edges feel worn, but the design often remains visible. Copper-based coins age beautifully. They darken. They tone. They collect layers of history on their surface. Every mark on a coin from this time might come from a shop counter, a coat pocket, a soldier's uniform, or a family table. Value today depends on condition. A worn penny worth only basic collector interest might show a smooth portrait and dull surfaces. A fine-grade penny shows clear details that survived decades of use. A high-grade piece with full sharp lines and natural shine can rise in value because high-grade survivors of this year are harder to find. Most were used heavily. Few stayed protected. Even fewer remained untouched. A truly crisp example feels like a treasure saved by chance. To judge condition, collectors look at the portrait of the king. If the hair and beard still show sharp lines, then the coin is strong. If the face looks flat, then the coin is worn. On Britannia, the trident, the shield, and the folds of the robes show the most wear. If these lines remain tall and sharp, then the coin may be in a high grade. The rim also matters. A strong, full rim means the coin survived without major damage. Some rare varieties exist with small differences in lettering, dense planchet issues, die cracks, and strike strength. These small differences can raise value because collectors love uniqueness. A small die crack above a letter or a tiny raised line near Britannia can make a coin stand out. These were never intentional. They were the result of pressure, speed, and stress on the minting machines. In a year like 1917, when production was urgent and constant, such errors appeared more often than usual. Finding a rare high-grade penny today is not easy, but it is still possible. Many old houses still hold jars of old coins. Antique shops carry boxes filled with mixed coins. Some families discover them in inherited drawers and tins. Old collections often hide pieces untouched for decades. Many people do not know the value or history of these pennies and sell them without checking. This creates opportunities for collectors who know what to look for. The 1917 George V penny represents more than currency. It carries the feeling of an age where the world was changing faster than ever before. It carries the memory of soldiers who marched through fields of hardship. It carries the voice of a nation that refused to break. This small piece of bronze has survived longer than many of the people who once used it, and today it stands as a reminder of resilience and history. When you hold a 1917 George, the fifth one penny, you hold a witness from a world that was changing faster than anyone alive at that time could ever imagine. The year carries a weight that goes beyond the metal of the coin because every strike from the Royal Mint was done during a moment when uncertainty, fear, and hope were all mixed together across the entire British Empire. This coin was created during a time when soldiers marched across muddy battlefields and families waited for news from loved ones, while factories worked day and night without pause. And Britain did everything it could to keep the world from collapsing into complete chaos. The design of this coin was made to project strength and unity at a time when the empire needed every reminder of stability it could get. The portrait of King George V was carefully engraved to show calm seriousness and dignity. He was not only the monarch, but also a symbol of steadiness for a nation that desperately needed direction. The artist Bertram Mackennal crafted a portrait that was both authoritative and compassionate. A portrait that still commands attention even though more than a century has passed. Turn the coin over and you meet Britannia seated with her shield, her spear, and her sturdy stance looking out over the sea. She represents courage, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of the people. She was placed on the coin not just for decoration, but to send a message to every citizen that Britain would endure and that the empire, even in its hardest struggle, would not bend. The waves beside her, the trident she holds, and the shield marked with the cross are all symbols packed with meaning. And each line on this coin was placed with intention and purpose. The metal used to create this penny was simple yet strong. A bronze mixture that had been used for decades in British coinage. Copper, tin, and zinc blended together to produce a durable coin that could survive constant handling, trade circulation, and rough pockets. The weight, the thickness, and the sturdy edge made the coin easy to feel and easy to recognize, making it a reliable workhorse in markets, jobs, and daily purchases across the empire. Whether someone bought a loaf of bread, a newspaper, or a ride on a tram, this penny played its part and kept the economy functioning even while the world shook around it. What makes the 1917 penny even more interesting is that it represents one of the last sturdy wartime bronze issues before the metal shortages began pressing the mint into difficult decisions. Later years faced challenges, but 1917 still carried the traditional strength of older bronze, making these coins especially solid and dependable. Many were used heavily since coins remained in circulation much longer back then. So examples found today often show the scars of real history-worn surfaces, faded details, and marks from countless hands that once lived through the turmoil of their era. But within this sea of ordinary circulated pieces, there are rare survivors that shock collectors. Cleanly struck examples with strong details. Crisp portrait lines, smooth fields, and clear Britannia images stand out as treasures. And even more astonishing are those extremely rare cases where the coin remained untouched for decades, stored away in an attic drawer, placed in a tin, or forgotten in a box of old family keepsakes. These uncirculated examples can look almost unreal with bright original color and glowing surfaces that make you forget the coin is more than 100 years old. And then there are the mistakes, the minting errors, the unexpected surprises that add a layer of excitement for collectors. A misalignment, a weak strike, a die crack, or a slightly rotated design can turn an ordinary penny into a conversation piece and sometimes a valuable find. Even minor errors gain attention because this was a wartime minting period when machinery was under pressure, when workers were pushed to keep up with demand, and when quality control often battled against time and necessity. These small imperfections became historical fingerprints of the stressful conditions under which these coins were born. Imagine the thousands of hands this coin passed through. A soldier buying a warm drink before boarding a train. A mother purchasing food for her family. A worker entering a factory at dawn. A vendor counting change at the end of a long day. Every touch left a story. Every scratch marked a moment. Every bit of wear became a silent record of the real people who lived in one of the most intense chapters of human history. The 1917 penny is more than a collector piece. It is a human relic, and each one that survives continues to whisper fragments of life from more than a century ago. 1938, George VI 1 penny, United Kingdom. The year is 1938, and the world stands on the edge of a storm that no one can ignore. And this single bronze penny carries the quiet tension of that moment in history. When you hold a 1938 George, the 6th 1 penny, you are not holding just a coin. You are holding a fragment of a world standing between peace and the beginning of the greatest conflict humanity would ever face. This penny was struck at a time when fear was rising across Europe, when negotiations were fragile, and when the British Empire was preparing itself for a future filled with uncertainty. The portrait on the front shows the young King George VI, presented with calm strength and steady resolve. His profile was designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget, and it captures a king who did not expect to rule but stepped forward when duty demanded it. His face is simple, honest, and grounded. He does not appear regal in an extravagant way, but instead looks like a leader who carries heavy responsibility with quiet dignity. People in Britain looked to him for reassurance during a moment when hope and fear walked side by side. And the portrait reflects that weight with every small engraved detail. Turn the coin over and you find Britannia, the symbol of British unity, sitting with her shield, her spear, and her watchful gaze across the sea. She represents steadiness, courage, and the spirit of the empire. Her presence on the penny was meant to tell people that no matter what challenges lay ahead, Britain would stand firm. Her shield rests with confidence. Her trident rises with authority. And the waves around her remind you of the island nation that ruled far corners of the world. These images were chosen carefully to communicate strength at a time when the empire needed stability more than ever. The 1938 penny is made from a bronze mixture that Britain had used for decades. The blend of copper, tin, and zinc created a tough coin that could survive daily use. Markets, buses, trams, small purchases, chores, and all the ordinary details of life. The weight is around 9.5 grams, the diameter just over 30 millimeters, and the thickness designed to make the coin easy to identify by touch alone. This was practical money meant to withstand years of circulation. And the minting quality in 1938 was strong, because this was one of the final peaceful years before wartime strain would alter minting standards. What makes this penny even more meaningful is that it was created just 1 year before the world plunged into the Second World War. The mint had no idea what awaited. But history shows us that the coins made during these earlier years have a calmness that would soon be replaced by the urgency of wartime survival. Many of these pennies were used heavily during the war. They passed through the hands of soldiers, factory workers, nurses, children, shopkeepers, and families trying to make the best of difficult times. For this reason, high-grade survivors are far less common than many expect. Most 1938 pennies found today show wear on the King's hairlines, loss of detail on Britannia's gown, and soft edges around the shield and lettering. This heavy circulation gives them historical character, but also makes well-preserved examples more rare. When you find one that still holds sharp lines, deep color, and bright bronze glow, it feels like discovering a time capsule untouched by the chaos that followed. Only a small number were ever saved in mint-fresh condition, because few people imagined that these ordinary pennies would become valuable collectors' pieces one day. There are also small, subtle minting variations that can appear and make certain pieces more interesting to numismatists. Differences in strike strength, tiny die cracks, slight misalignments, and weakly struck areas can all appear from time to time. These minor imperfections happened because machinery at the Royal Mint was working constantly in those years, and dies wore down faster than expected. Collectors prize these small minting quirks because they bring personality to a coin that already has a profound historical background. The rarity of the 1938 penny does not come from a tiny mintage, but from the survival rate. Many were melted, destroyed, or worn so thin they disappeared from circulation long before decimalization. The ones that survived in high grade were usually kept accidentally in drawers or tins, sometimes by people who simply saved a handful of old coins without knowing their future value. Every untouched coin discovered today feels like a message from someone long gone, a silent reminder of their life, their hopes, and the moment in history they lived through. When you imagine the journey of one 1938 penny, it becomes even more powerful. Picture it being used by a man buying a morning newspaper filled with headlines about rising threats. Picture it in the pocket of a young woman working at a factory, punching her time card. Picture it being handed to a schoolchild by a parent trying to keep life normal. Picture it traveling through cities lit only by dim lamps. Picture it being spent during nights when people listened to speeches on the radio, hoping for peace. All these stories live inside the small scratches and faded details on the coin. This penny is not rare because of a tiny mintage. It is rare because time has erased so many of its brothers. Most were worn to smooth discs by the end of the war and replaced by newer issues later on. So when someone finds a 1938 penny with strong detail, it becomes a treasure that captures a final breath of the world before everything changed. As we continue the story of the 1938 George VI one penny, we step into the most exciting part of this coin's journey. The part where rarities, value, survival, gradings, and unexpected treasures begin to shape the true identity of this remarkable British coin. Because even though millions were minted, only a small fraction remain in the condition that collectors truly desire. And fewer still carry the mysterious marks, errors, and hidden traits that can push their worth far beyond what any ordinary penny would ever be expected to bring. The first thing to understand is how this coin traveled through history. Because unlike gold or silver coins, which were often saved, bronze pennies were used without hesitation. They passed from hand to hand, from shops to workers, from children to families, and from wartime pockets to post-war days. This constant movement wore them down quickly, which is why most 1938 pennies found today have a faded portrait, softened design, worn rims, and smooth fields. The king's hair becomes faint, Britannia's gown loses its sharp lines, and her shield fades as if history itself slowly erased the details with every touch. This heavy wear is the biggest reason that high-grade examples are rare. And it is also why collectors stare in surprise when they find a coin from 1938 that still carries crisp detail, bright original colors, and strong luster. Such pieces are survivors that escape the brutal environment of circulation, and they stand apart from the millions that were worn down. These high-grade survivors are the foundation of the coin's value, and they command strong demand from collectors who want to preserve this last peaceful era before the world plunged into war. Now we step into grading, the scale that determines condition, value, and rarities. The lowest grades are the most common, with coins that are worn down until they show only the major outlines. A coin in poor or fair condition carries deep wear, weak rims, and nearly smooth surfaces. These are historically interesting but low in market value. Next come the good and very good grades, which show slightly clearer details but still heavy wear. Then fine and very fine grades, where the king's facial features begin to appear and Britannia shows folds in the gown and clearer lines on the shield. These coins are still circulated, but they carry stronger collector appeal. The real prizes begin with extremely fine grades, where only small traces of wear appear on the highest points. The fields become cleaner, the rims sharper, and the coin begins to look impressive even though it has seen a little use. Above that, we reach about uncirculated grades. Coins with only faint marks and slight friction. And these pieces are rare because almost no one in 1938 saved pennies in such condition. And then the uncirculated grades. From brilliant uncirculated to the highest mint state levels, where the coin glows with full luster, sharp detail, and strong eye appeal. These are the coins that shock collectors because they seem untouched by time. And finding one is like discovering a century-old treasure chest still sealed and untarnished. Value grows rapidly as condition improves. A heavily worn 1938 penny may be worth only a small amount. But a fine or very fine example becomes more appealing for collectors. And a coin in extremely fine or about uncirculated condition can bring many times more because so few were preserved. The highest mint state coins command the strongest prices, as they represent the best survivors of a generation long gone. Their rarity is not due to a small mintage, but due to the incredible difficulty of finding a coin that escaped decades of everyday handling. But condition is not the only path to value, because the 1938 penny carries another realm of excitement. Minting errors. These are mistakes that were never meant to happen, yet manage to escape the mint and reach public hands. Some examples show die cracks. Small raised lines across the surface created when the minting die began to fracture. Others may show off-center strikes, where the design is shifted toward one rim, leaving blank area on the opposite side. A few may display clogged lettering, weak areas, and doubling caused by movement during striking. These errors turn a common penny into a unique artifact, and collectors pay strong premiums because each error is one of a kind. There are also subtle varieties created when different dies were used during the year. Slight differences in portrait detail, spacing, lettering alignment, or strike strength can appear. These details are often overlooked by casual observers, but collectors who study dies know that tiny shifts in design can indicate a different die pair, creating miniature groups of rarer coins within the full mintage. These die varieties can command higher value, especially when combined with strong condition. Finding rare and valuable examples requires patience, knowledge, and luck. The best places to search include old collections, inherited boxes, drawers, tins, attic finds, bags of pre-decimal coins, and coin dealers who still sort through older British bulk stock. Many high-grade coins surface from forgotten collections rather than circulation searches, because surviving mint state coins were usually saved by someone decades ago without realizing how rare they would become. As for mintage, the Royal Mint produced more than the number needed at the time, and most was spent heavily throughout the war years. But survival rate is the key factor. Millions minted does not mean millions survive in collectible grades, and that is where rarity emerges. A coin may have been common in 1938, but time has not been kind to it, and the number of high-grade pieces remaining today is surprisingly low, especially compared to earlier George V pennies that were saved more frequently by collectors. The 1938 penny carries shock value not through precious metal, but through the weight of history and the challenge of finding one in exceptional condition. It stands at the doorway between peace and war, between an old world and the beginning of a new era, between the last calm breath and the storm that reshaped the entire planet. This emotional connection adds to its appeal and continues to draw collectors who want a piece of that moment preserved in bronze. 1963 Queen Elizabeth II, 1 penny United Kingdom. The year is 1963 and the world is changing fast. And in your hand sits a small bronze coin that carries the quiet voice of an empire nearing its final chapter. The 1963 Queen Elizabeth II 1 penny. This penny seems simple at first glance, yet it holds the weight of tradition, history, and the fading rhythm of a currency system that had shaped life in Britain for centuries. When you hold this coin, you hold the heartbeat of everyday life in a nation preparing for vast transformation. A nation standing only a few years away from the end of an era that stretched back hundreds of years. The portrait on the front shows a young Queen Elizabeth II, presented with calm grace and the unmistakable strength that defined her early reign. The image was created by sculptor Mary Gillick, and unlike later portraits, This design carries a softness and warmth that reflects a hopeful beginning for a modern monarchy. The queen is shown uncrowned, which sends a simple message that she represents her people with humility and dedication. The flowing hair, the fresh youthful features, and the clear lines of the profile create a feeling of optimism and renewal, a spirit that Britain needed as it stepped into a new age. Turn the coin over and you see Britannia, the symbol of the British Isles, seated with her trident, her shield, and the waves rolling behind her. Britannia had appeared on the penny for more than 2 centuries, and her presence in 1963 linked the coin to a long chain of tradition that stretched far back into the past. Her calm pose, her steady gaze, and her protective shield all reflected the idea of security and unity. For many years, Britannia reminded people that no matter how much the world changed, the identity of Britain would remain firm and unwavering. This coin was minted from bronze, a mix of copper, tin, and zinc that had been used for decades for everyday pennies. The weight is strong, the feel solid, and the size large enough to serve as both money and a familiar part of daily life. In pockets, in purses, in shop counters, in train stations, at markets, and in crowded London streets, the sound of pennies like this one echoed in the rhythm of daily Britain. The scent of bronze, the warm colors, and the smooth texture of the coin created a physical connection between the people and their currency. A connection that would soon come to an end when decimalization arrived in 1971. What makes the 1963 penny fascinating is that it belongs to the final chapter of the old per-decimal system. This coin was struck during a year when Britain was preparing for dramatic economic change, though most people at the time did not yet realize just how close the end was. The old penny had existed for generations, and the copper-bronze coins had become symbols of tradition, reliabilities, and everyday normal lives. By the early 60s, the penny still worked hard across every corner of the kingdom. It was used for bus rides, newspapers, sweets, children's toys, public telephones, and small daily purchases that tied communities together. Because it was used constantly, many of the 1963 pennies you find today show heavy wear. Worn hair on the Queen's portrait, smooth surfaces on the fields, faded lines on Britannia, weak rims, brown surfaces, and countless tiny marks from decades of use are common. This heavy circulation gives the coin history, but also makes high-grade survivors rare, especially those kept untouched since the day they left the Royal Mint. Clean, bright, glowing coins with sharp detail are treasured because they represent the last breath of the old system before modernization took over. The Royal Mint produced a large number of pennies in 1963, but survival in uncirculated grade is far from common. Most people did not save new bronze pennies in rolls or collections because they were seen as ordinary and plentiful, not rare or valuables. As a result, the best condition pieces today usually come from old jars, tins, dressers, forgotten drawers, or family collections that were unintentionally preserved for decades without anyone realizing what they had done. The most exciting surprises come from minting errors and unexpected varieties. Errors create the kind of shock that collectors love because they transform a common penny into a rare and unusual piece. A misstrike, a die crack, a clipped planchet, a weakly struck Britannia, a rotated design, or letters that appear doubled can turn a regular 1963 penny into something far more desirable. The Royal Mint equipment in the early 60s was reliable but not perfect, and mistakes did slip through during busy production periods. Every error tells a story about the moment of its creation, and each flawed coin becomes unique, with value far beyond its face. Varieties also exist through minor differences in dies, alignment, and strike strength. Some coins show stronger details in the Queen's hair, some show weaker Britannia designs, and some display slightly different spacing in lettering. These subtle variations do not jump out immediately, but collectors who study dies know that even small differences can create micro-rarities within the full production of the year. Finding valuable 1963 pennies requires patience and sharp eyes. The best discoveries often happen in old coin bags, inherited family tins, second-hand shops, car boot sales, and collections that have been untouched for decades. Because so many circulated heavily, the few remaining in top grade often appear suddenly and unexpectedly after long-forgotten storage. The thrill of discovering one is powerful because you realize you are looking at a survivor from a world long gone. A world before decimalization, before massive economic changes, and before modern minting replaced traditional bronze coins forever. This coin represents the steady transition of Britain as it moved from post-war rebuilding toward new technology, new systems, and new identities. It captures a peaceful yet meaningful moment in the story of the nation. A moment suspended between tradition and modernity, between an ancient currency system and the dawn of a new one. The 1963 penny is more than just bronze. It is a farewell to a historic system that shaped everyday life for generations. As we continue the story of the 1963 Queen Elizabeth II one penny, we enter the powerful world of grading, rarities, value, and the quiet mysteries hidden inside this final era of British bronze coinage. Because although millions of these pennies were minted, only a very small number survive today in the kind of condition that truly captivates collectors. And within this sea of ordinary worn coins, there exist rare treasures, minting mistakes, high-grade survivors, and unexpected finds that can shock even experienced collectors. Before we explore the value of this coin, we must understand why condition matters more than almost anything else. The 1963 penny was designed for constant circulation. It was meant to be spent, used, handled, and worn down over decades. And that is exactly what happened. Because of this, most surviving coins today show heavy wear. The Queen's hair becomes smooth. The facial details fade. The rim weakens. Britannia loses the fine folds in her gown. The shield flattens, and the fields become marked from years of pockets, purses, drawers, and countertops. This heavy wear makes low-grade coins extremely common and low in value. But their history remains powerful. The grading scale reveals the true difference between an ordinary penny and a valuable one. At the lowest levels, we have poor, fair, and good grades. These coins are flat, worn, and barely show their original details. They may be interesting as relics, but they have minimal collector value. Then come the very good and fine grades, where the portrait and Britannia begin to show clearer shapes. Though most of the fine lines are still gone, these coins are common and easy to find in old jars, bags, and collections. The excitement begins when you reach very fine and extremely fine grades, because these coins are surprisingly hard to find. The Queen's hair starts showing depth and texture. The letters become sharp. Britannia's gown reveals more folds, and the shield regains its definition. A penny in this condition is a real survivor from a time when the old predecimal system powered daily life during markets, busy streets, trams, and shops. Coins in these grades begin to carry real collector appeal, and their value rises quickly. Then we reach the highest levels, about uncirculated and fully uncirculated, where the coin looks almost new. These coins show only tiny marks from handling or storage. Bright original bronze color, and clear, sharp detail that seems untouched by time. Many collectors search for these mint-state coins because they represent the final breath of the traditional British bronze penny before decimalization changed everything. Finding a 1963 penny in brilliant uncirculated grade is rare, because very few people saved pennies in perfect condition. The bronze surfaces tone quickly, and marks appear easily, so only a small number survive without wear. Now we enter the most exciting area, minting errors. This is where the 1963 penny becomes unpredictable, and where normal coins transform into valuable and fascinating surprises. One of the more dramatic errors is an off-center strike, where the design is shifted toward the rim, leaving a blank crescent on one side. Another thrilling error is a clipped planchet, where part of the coin is missing because the metal sheet was improperly cut. Some coins show die cracks, small raised lines caused by cracks in the minting die. And these lines can travel across the fields or even through Britannia or the Queen's portrait. Weak strikes also appear when the metal did not fully fill the dies, causing faint details on one side. Rotated designs happen when the two dies were misaligned, creating a twist between the front and back. Doubled letters or slightly doubled features can occur when the die shifted during hubbing. All of these errors add rarity, and collectors pay strong premiums because each one is unique. Every error is a singular moment of minting history captured forever in bronze. Even without errors, there are subtle varieties created by different dies used during production. Slight differences in lettering, spacing, strike strength, or relief height can appear. Some examples show stronger details on the Queen's hair, while others have deeper folds on Britannia's gown. These differences may seem small, but in the world of coin collecting, even the slightest variation can create a micro-rarity that becomes desirable to specialists. To find a valuable 1963 penny, you must search in places others often overlook. Old biscuit tins, old jars, forgotten drawers, old boxes of coins left behind by family members, or coins stored away before decimalization took effect. Many high-grade survivors appear from these hidden places, untouched for decades, waiting to be rediscovered. The excitement of finding a bright, glowing, original penny from 1963 is powerful because it feels like receiving a message from the past, perfectly preserved across time. Though millions were minted, the survival of high-grade coins is the true measure of rarity. Time, humidity, handlings, and storage all work against bronze coins, and many developed spots, corrosion, or wears. The number of fully uncirculated coins left today is small, and they continue to become harder to find each year as collectors take the best examples into permanent collections. The 1963 penny holds a strong historical spark because it represents the final stretch of Britain's old monetary system. This was the last calm period before decimalization changed daily life forever. This penny holds the feeling of post-war Britain, modern yet traditional, moving forward but still connected to its past. When someone finds a perfect example today, it becomes a treasured relic of that time, a piece of the last generation of large bronze pennies that shaped British life for more than a century. Thank you for watching the entire video. You can tell us in the comments what we should make the next video about.